Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today is a Q&A episode. I have three questions I want to dive into, but first, before I get into that, I just want to go over a few ways you can help support the podcast. So first, if you haven't yet, if you could leave a rating and review, and that will help more people find this podcast. Again, I appreciate everybody who listens, but obviously this will help the podcast grow, and I can continue to put more time and effort into this podcast and give you guys the information that you all deserve. Next, I have my free masterclass on body recomp, what it is, how to do it. I dive into all the nitty gritty on body recomp, and you should have the tools to be able to set yourself up for that. Again, this is absolutely free. The link is in the show notes for that. I also have my masterclass on nutrition periodization, which I am going to hit on throughout this episode a couple times. Again, that link is in the show notes as well too. Again, it's completely free, and I go over each nutrition phase, how to do it, how to set it up, adjustments you need to make, common mistakes, and you'll know what to do for each phase there with that. And again, both of those links are in the show notes. Next, if you haven't yet, give me a follow on Instagram, Jeff HOEHN_, and that's where I'm most active on social media. And if you have any questions, anything that pops up from this podcast, you can just shoot me a message on there and I will get back to you. So with that out of the way, let's dive into today's question. So the first question I have is, do I need to use a nutrition periodization phasic approach, right? Do I need to go through these cycles of cutting and building? And again, do you absolutely have to? No, but if you're somebody who does need to lose 5 to 10% or more of your body weight, or you want to get like very lean, think like sub 8 to 10% for men, 15 to 17% for women, you're not going to get there in one weight loss phase, at least not in a most optimal body composition standpoint, right? So at this point, you are going to need a phasic approach, multiple fat loss and building maintenance phases to this, right? And a lot of people, what they don't understand is that losing body fat and maintaining that body fat involves changing your habits and lifestyle. It's not going to be a low calorie diet and intense workout program for 12 weeks. And with my clients, I make sure to place a large emphasis on the education and habit building side of things. And because that's what's going to get you to actually see the results that you want to see. And again, these kind of quick fixes, again, they're not going to teach you anything. You're not going to learn new habits. You're not going to increase your skills. And because of that, you might be in the same spot over the next in 6 months, right? So this is where I think a phasic approach to nutrition can be super helpful. And again, if you're trying to lose more than 5 to 10% of your body weight, you're going to run into issues, right? And so I'm going to go over today what a phasic approach is, and then I'm going to talk about why you need to have this phasic approach to it, right? So I want to dive into that. All right, so let's talk. What is a phasic approach? And this is periods of time when you have different nutrition goals. And again, just to remind you, I have my nutrition periodization free masterclass on it. And again, the link to that is in the show notes, and you can pick that up there. So it's where we have different nutrition goals, right? So we have like our fat loss / recomp phase, right? This is where you're going to have less flexibility. You're going to have a lower caloric intake. We're going to be dropping body fat while maintaining muscle. And potentially in a recomp scenario, we'll be able to build some muscle in that process. So that's one of the phases. Next, we have our maintenance / building phases. When these phases, you're going to have more food flexibility. We're going to continue to build your habits and lifestyle changes that are going to help maintain your fat loss and help future fat loss phases. We want to make sure we're giving our body enough energy and essential vitamins and minerals to make sure your body's performing and feeling its best. And we obviously want to add muscle in these phases. And then you cycle back and forth between these phases. Again, if you want the specific, like how long do I need to be in it? What do my calories, macros need to look like? Then that nutrition periodization masterclass is for you. And again, the link to that is in the show notes. But now I want to talk about, okay, so say you have 5 to 10% or more of your body weight to lose. It's like, why can't I just do that in one phase? Like, why do I have to take this approach? That doesn't make any sense to me. I'm not where I want to be. Why would I do that? The first reason is diet fatigue / adherence. Once you lose about 5% of your body weight, your body will start to fight you on weight loss a little bit more. Things like energy levels decrease, hunger increases, you think more about food, right? You just have that food focus, and you risk muscle loss, among other things. So those are the main ones. I'm sure you've been there before. You went on this fat loss diet, things were going well, and then all of a sudden you just didn't want to train anymore. You wanted to eat anything and everything. You couldn't stop thinking about food. Maybe it's like you were losing weight, but you just felt like a skinnier, just a skinnier version of yourself, you weren't maintaining muscle or anything like that. Again, all these are going to lead to less adherence to a calorie deficit, aka you're trying to lose more body fat, but you just can't at this point, right? Diet fatigue and adherence is just that's one of the main reasons why we want to add this in, right? Because what you happen is people don't do that. They just want to they got to lose more than 5 to 10% of their body weight, and they just keep going. And then they get super hungry. They don't want to train. And then boom, it just all comes back on because they're like, man, this freaking sucks. I'm never going to be able to do this. But it's because you're trying to go at it all at one time, and you're basically working against your body rather than working with it. So we want to make sure that we implement this for the diet fatigue and adherence aspect. By taking time away from fat loss, you let your body recover from the diet fatigue, right? Hunger decreases, energy levels come back, you think less about food, you're maintaining your muscle, potentially even building it. And this is going to make future fat loss phases more likely to be successful and a higher chance of maintaining this fat loss as well too, because you're taking care of these issues in the process. We want to make sure that we don't just go, hey, let's make this easy, 200 pounds. 5 to 10% of that is, what would that be? 10 to 20 pounds. You get to 180 and you're like, I just got to keep going. I want to get to 150. I got to get to 150 at all costs. It's going to be really challenging. You're not going to be happy with your look, and you're better off getting to, let's say, 180. Now you take a break from fat loss, let some of this diet fatigue come off. Maybe your weight comes back to 185, but now you're feeling good. You're ready to go. You're ready to push a deficit again, but now you're at 185. Now you push maybe 185 down to 170. Again, it's going to take you longer to get there, but you're also going to keep it longer as well too. And that's ultimately what we want, right? And again, along the way here, you're also building habits. You're learning more about your body. You're building muscle. So again, maybe you don't even need to get as low as you think because you're adding muscle in this process. You're maintaining muscle. So all these things trickle down. And the longer you can maintain your weight loss, the more likely it is that it's going to last as well too. Next, another big reason why we want to break our fat loss phases up and have this more phasic approach to our nutrition is the skill aspect. As you get leaner and leaner or lose more body weight, this requires more skill to do and maintain. Again, it's going to be tougher and tougher to maintain that weight loss the further you get down. Everything's going to be pulling you away from that and to go back to where you were before. But if we haven't developed the skill of maintaining it, developing better habits along the way, then you're going to be more likely to go back to where you were before. So again, too often I see people try to get to a body weight or leanness that they haven't simply developed the skill for yet. It's a skill. It's a lifestyle change that you have to have. And if you're just trying to get it all done in one swoop as quick as you can, you haven't built that skill to maintain that yet. And again, it's like building a house with no foundation, right? It's going to fall at some point. The thing that I always tell clients is with each fat loss phase and each building maintenance phase you're going to get better at them. And then in turn, making them more effective and efficient. So it's like you do that first fat loss phase and hey, maybe you saw 10 to 20 pounds because you were fairly overweight. It was a lot easier. You didn't have to have the skill that you had to get from 180 to 170. So again, it can make it, and then you continue to build these habits. Now you're at 180 and you want to get down to 170 in that next fat loss phase, but now you have more skills. You know how to manage the fat loss phase better. And yeah, it's still going to be challenging to get down, but it's a new challenge that you're now able to handle because you have developed your skill versus if you take the same skill that you have when you were at 200 to get down to 170, that's going to be a lot more challenging. And then on top of it, you also have all the diet fatigue and whatnot on top of it. You can get to a body weight in one shot, but if you haven't developed the skills to maintain that, you're going to end up having to lose the same 10 to 20 pounds of body fat over and over again on there with that. So again, it also helps us develop the skill to be able to break through barriers. And then the big one here, one that I'm always talking about, is muscle. The other big reason we want to work in a phasic approach is to maintain the muscle you do have, but to also build more muscle. Again, most people underestimate how much muscle they have, and they underestimate how easy it is to build it. And that's a big reason why they struggle to maintain the body composition or body weight that they want, is they just don't have the muscle that they need to have. When you have less muscle, you also have to lose a little bit more weight than you ideally would want to get down to the body weight that you feel decent at. But I would imagine that even when you get down there, you're still like, man, I want to continue to lose more. So muscle helps you maintain body weight, but it also helps you also will probably be at a little bit of a higher body weight than you think you need to get at, which is great. I think if anything, that's only going to be helpful there. But again, muscle is going to help you have an improved look at any given body weight, and it can make maintaining and losing body fat much easier in the future. Again, if you're always trying to fat loss diet or lose weight or lose a lot of weight at one time, maintaining and building muscle gets tougher and tougher. And that's where people really run into issues, right? They try to go from 200 down to 170 and they can get to 180, but then things slow down and they're trying to push it even more. And now their deficit's larger. They're not eating any protein. Now they're trying to do more cardio, and they're just risking muscle in the process. They're risking losing muscle in that process. And now, again, you don't have the look that you want. Muscle is just great for overall health. And this is the third reason why we want to have that phasic approach there. So again, if you have more than 5 to 10% of your body weight to lose, we want to use a phasic approach to get over that. And biggest reasons in a phasic approach is having different nutrition goals for periods of time. Sometimes it's fat loss, sometimes it's maintaining/building muscle. And we want to do it this way: 1, for diet, fatigue, and adherence; 2, for the skill; and then 3, for muscle. So let me know if you have any questions on this topic. And again, I'm going to lead you to the nutrition periodization masterclass that I have, and that will help you manage that and figure out what your macros need to be, how to manage it, what adjustments you need to make, and whatnot there. All right, so my next question is, any specific advice about bulking after 40? So again, I would encourage you, if this is a question you have or you're thinking about this yourself, definitely go and check out that nutrition periodization masterclass. And again, the building phase goes over all this. So with this particular avatar, over 40, push these clients closer to maintenance or the high end of that, and focus more on stress management, sleep habits, overall diet quality, and good consistent training that keeps them injury free, right? To me, those are big rocks that we need to focus on before being like, hey, I'm over 40, should I be bulking or not? So let's make sure these are in check first, right? Because if any of these are off and you're trying to add a calorie surplus in, I don't think it's going to be the greatest from a body composition standpoint. You might add a little bit more body fat than you'd want. So first, we need to make sure this is in check, right? We need to make sure that obviously we want to have some stress, but we want to make sure it's managed. We don't want to make sure that our overall stress load is too high. We want to make sure we obviously have good sleep habits, because if we don't have great sleep habits and we're trying to add weight, again, probably going to add a little bit more body fat than you'd want. Again, overall diet quality. Are you hitting enough protein? Are you getting enough micronutrients? Is your diet quality as a whole in a good spot? You have a good base of like whole foods and fruit, veggie, and stuff like that. And then obviously good consistent training towards building muscle. Again, if you're over 40 and you're doing training that's not really specific towards building muscle, can we shift a little bit more of that to it before we worry about being in a surplus there with that? I will say protein might have to be slightly higher, especially for women over 40, just because based on research, it does show that this population, as you get 40s, 50s or higher, you might need your body's ability to synthesize protein and everything. It might be a little bit hampered at this age. So again, you might need a little bit more protein to get that same response, that protein synthesis response. And so we want to maybe get a little bit more protein overall, and making sure you don't go too long around your workouts without protein, especially for women in this age range or higher, but even men in general too. I would say, again, probably you want a little bit more protein. At least put a good focus on it. Again, I think 1 gram per pound of body weight is still a solid number to aim for there with that, but maybe you go a little bit higher just to be on the safe side, and then make sure you're getting your protein in, some protein in around your workouts, and not going too long without protein there. But in saying that, if someone was over 40 and everything was in a good spot and they wanted to really push muscle growth, they could do a small calorie surplus just like anyone else could, right? I think, again, it comes back to the lifestyle. Is that in check? And again, maybe in this population over the age of 40, it's always important, but maybe we focus on it just a little bit more, because I think if those things are off, it impacts everything a little bit more. Whereas somebody under the age of 40, we still obviously want these things in a good spot, but I think you have a little bit more wiggle room and to get away with things, right? Whereas as you get a little bit older, you just have less wiggle room and everything needs to be in check. So again, I think those first things are going to be the most important. And then from there, if somebody really wants to maximize muscle growth, they're in a spot to where if they gain a tiny bit of body fat, it's not going to really decrease their body composition, then 100%, I'd still put this population in a small calorie surplus. Again, we would have this conversation of, hey, is you being in a small calorie surplus going to be more beneficial than being closer to your maintenance during this period of time? And that's a conversation we have, and we figure out from there, and we go over the pros and cons of it. But again, what I will say though is, in general, and this goes for if somebody's 25, whether somebody's 45, 50, I think a smaller calorie surplus is the way to go though. We don't want to have too large of a calorie surplus, because that's just going to add a little bit of extra body fat that we don't necessarily need, and it's not going to add more muscle growth, right? That recent study from Eric Helms goes over that, right? The quicker they gain weight, the more body fat that they accumulated for not any extra muscle growth, right? So again, that just shows that, hey, we probably want to have this smaller surplus. But again, this is where I'm going to push you towards that nutrition periodization masterclass, where I go over all these things. And this is a question that kind of goes in line with this. Okay. So the last question of the day: does a small surplus really help with building muscle? Afraid to increase in case it just becomes fat. So compared to a deficit, yes, 100% a small surplus is going to improve your body's ability to add muscle, right? Compared to maintenance calories, still a small surplus is probably going to be better for building muscle. But in the last case, just because something is better doesn't mean you can't still build muscle at maintenance, right? So you might just build a little bit less than you would in a surplus. So you need to weigh the pros and cons of being in a small calorie surplus, right? I think this is the most important though, is like somebody hears that, okay, so I have to be in a calorie surplus to build muscle. No, but if you want to maximize it, yes. But if you're okay with maybe a little less gains, but still good gains, you could still be at maintenance if you want to. But it's like 3 levels, right? Like a small surplus is definitely going to be a little bit better than being at maintenance, but maintenance is definitely going to be better than being in a small deficit. However, within that, you can still build muscle in a small deficit, right? People hear, no, there's no way you can't build muscle in a deficit. And that's just not the case. We have plenty of research. And again, even just working with clients, like it's context dependent though. People are like, oh, you can't do it, but that's just wrong. With most things in fitness, it's very context dependent. So let's take this deficit, right? You can't still build muscle in a deficit. However, if you're super lean, you already have a good amount of muscle, like you're not going to be able to build muscle in a deficit. At best, you're gonna be able to maintain it. Now, it's going to depend on the size of the deficit as well. The larger the deficit, the less likely you are to maintain your muscle. So you need to find that sweet spot there with that. Yeah, we need to look at that. However, if you're someone who is, say, for men, above 15% body fat, for women, above like 20 to 22%, you have maybe a little to moderate amount of muscle mass, like you can build muscle in a deficit, right? Like it can happen. And again, we're improving your lifestyle and everything like that as well too in the process, improving your training protocols. You can build muscle in a deficit. Now, again, though, just because you can doesn't mean it's necessarily better than being at maintenance or a small surplus, right? So we need to understand that you're not going to maximize muscle growth in a deficit, but it can still happen. But it is dependent on how large a deficit is. No matter what, even if you're pretty high body fat, you have little amount of muscle, your training hasn't been great, hasn't been geared towards muscle, but you still go into a really large calorie deficit, you're not going to be building muscle in that process. So again, the size of the deficit plays a big role in that there with that. Okay. So we need to understand that. So yeah, a long kind of answer to this. However, to go back to the original question, I'm afraid to increase just in case it becomes fat. Again, we went over things we would go over, but from there, if you have it under control, the amount of fat you gain will just be a small amount, and fat loss dieting is a lot easier than eating to build muscle is. Again, you do want to try to make that transition. Again, this is where you want to phase your nutrition. And I also find that people have some wiggle room to maximize some things for muscle growth before they worry about going into a small surplus or not. So also keep that in mind. And that goes back to the things that I talked about there with that. Hopefully that answers that. Again, I made this and somebody did kind of comment, oh, hey, there's no way you can build muscle in a deficit. You're only going to maintain. And it's like, we got to get away from that black or white because it is very context dependent. But again, I think, like I said, you're not going to maximize muscle growth in a deficit, but you can certainly do it. But it is context dependent. And I went over those things there with that. So hopefully that was helpful. That's it for this episode. I will chat with you guys next time. And also, if you have found, hey, I have questions on, can I build muscle in a deficit? What phase of nutrition do I need to be in? What do my macros need to be? How much training do I need to do? If these are all questions you have, that's what I have my 30-minute strategy call for. We can talk about what your goals are, where you want to go, and we can talk about how to bridge that gap and where we need to go there with that. If you're interested in that, the link to that is in the show notes. That's it for this episode. I'll chat with you guys next time.